Hey everybody, it's DisThunder from the Foosh, and we're back with yet another 112 review from Mezco Toys. This time we're going back to Rumble Society to meet Theodore Sodcutter, the caretaker of the Gangrene Estates. As you can probably tell by looking at him, he is an homage of sorts to the EC horror comics of the 1950s, and a little bit of Tales from the Crypt, a little bit of Twilight Zone, a little bit of Outer Limits, that kind of thing. They even managed to throw a Count Dante reference in the comic book he comes with, and I appreciate that. If I were to sum up this figure in just like a few sentences, it would be high on ambition, high on character, lots of features and accessories, but maybe a little too quirky for its own good, and that creates some faults. Obviously, we'll get into that. I would say the gimmick this whole figure is built around is this little guy right here. This is the LEDs that make up the neck and back of the headpiece for all of the alternate heads. As you see there, it's got an easy on-off switch that you access by popping the head off of the neck joint. Slip a couple of batteries in that front piece there. And then to change the heads, you're actually really more or less changing the faces and plugging them on top of this piece. There's a notch at the bottom and at the top, and you just kind of push them in until you feel it kind of lock in. After that, obviously, you just pop it right back on that neck joint. Just make sure you have it in the on or off switch, whatever's the desired result, before you put it on the shelf and forget it's on. You know how that goes. So you've got 6 heads in total, 5 that work with the LED. I'll just show them and let them speak for themselves. And this last one, the light's actually on, but since the eyes are kind of out of their sockets, it doesn't really work as well. I'm going to take his jacket off so we can discuss the articulation, but I wanted to show you a close-up of inside the vest there. You can see his clothing is very similar to Gaslight Joker, although I don't think any of this is reused from any other figure for obvious reasons. Getting into the articulation, he does have a ball socket joint on top of his hunchback, as you saw, but what you guys really want to talk about is these weird shoulder joints. He does have a universal joint, I think, at the top with maybe a bicep swivel. Does allow for some outward range. When it comes to rotating it, though, you almost have to just rotate it instead of lift it. I think this is more to do with the torso than the joint itself. It's like the joint's in it like a 45-degree angle. It's a little weird. And honestly, the dress shirt would have limited it regardless. But once you put the jacket on, they're essentially useless. No doubt some of you would call that a fault. I think it's just a design quirk. Whether it's good or bad, it's up to you. It does have a hinge swivel elbow, which is where the majority of the range of motion comes from, and that works just fine once you know where the joint is. Got a little bit of torso articulation and a pretty standard set of hips and double jointed knees, and actually a decent little ankle swivel. Were this the articulation on a superhero figure, I would obviously not be very satisfied, but for a figure like Theodore Sodcutter, it's hard for me to say it's wrong. I think it works for the character that's presented here, at least. Put his coat and jacket back on and we can talk about his accessories, starting with his headwear. He has 3 different hats. This kind of medium top hat he's got on here. This bowler cap, which I also like. These will work on any of the heads, by the way. And we've also got a larger top hat, more of a stovepipe hat, as you can see right here. When it comes to putting those hats on, there's actually a groove on each hat that kind of lines up with the eyebrows. So just kind of push them on until it's just right above his eyes, and they'll stay in place pretty securely. I appreciate how the different head and hat options mean you can decide how eerie or serious or creepy or even silly and stupid looking you want this guy to be. He doesn't take himself too seriously that way. Getting back into his included accessories, we have every gravedigger's best friend, a good shovel. And it is, of course, detailed and sculpted in a way that is what you would expect with a Mezco accessory. Pickaxe, same kind of thing. I don't mean to sell them short, they're just always great looking. Comes with this nice little leather-looking tool bag with a clasp on it that you can open up at the top here. He also comes with an LED lantern. Now, mine has some issues. I had to put a little copper wire in there to get the connectivity to work between the batteries, so that's why I left the bottom off of it. I think the effect is cool, but maybe a little too much LED for its own good. Who knows? He's also the second Mezco figure in a row to come with his own headstone, and like the Eric Draven one, it's made out of kind of like a polystone material. Has a really nice sculpt and paintwork on it. He also comes with some rope so you can tie it to his back, but I'm throwing that back in the bag. I don't like that kind of stuff. Like the heads, he comes with a lot of hand options for extra expressive posing, like these kind of open clawing hands. He has 2 gripping hands, which are on the figure here, of course. These are the most useful ones. You can use these with the pickaxe and the shovel, as well as the tool bag. They're flexible enough you can open up the grip to put whatever you need in there. I should also point out it's fortunate that that hinge swivel on his elbow is a pretty sturdy joint, so he can hold most of the accessories up without it drooping down or falling out of place. For more expressive gestures, we've got a pointing hand here and a beckoning hand, both of those bony index fingers. This next one actually a combination of accessory and hand. You've got a dainty holding a severed head hand option. This is pretty clever. The hand actually plugs into the back of the head, or the fingers more accurately, to hold it in place. There's something very unsettling about him holding a severed head like with his pinky out. I don't know. I like it. For some Mezco size comparisons, I figured the most 2 appropriate figures would be the Gaslight Joker, like I mentioned earlier, and Nosferatu. Because I felt like he borrows from Joker's style and maybe uses parts from Nosferatu's body. But now having all 3 of them together, it's obvious that, there may be influence from both these figures, but this is a new figure on his own entirely. Even like the forearms, as you can see here, he has a similar lanky arm to Nosferatu, but they are definitely different sculpts. Although I think it's safe to say one might have inspired the other. And for just additional scale options, we've got the obligatory Supreme Knight Batman and G.I. Joe classified comparisons. For as lanky as Theodore Sodcutter is, he's actually not as tall as you might be expecting him to be out of the box, like once you put him next to some other figures. But the extra high-end lankiness does kind of play into the intimidation factor. So if I can go full disclosure here, I have to be honest, I wasn't really all that excited about this figure out of the box. I thought he looked good in the solicits, but once I had him in hand, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with him, and the weird articulation and stuff kind of turned me off initially. But I can also honestly say the more I've worked with him and playing around with him doing this review, the more I've begun to appreciate him. And now I can think of all kinds of weird graveyard scenarios that he can be in the background of for pictures and other stuff. So the creepy little bastard kind of grew on me. So as far as recommending this guy goes, he's certainly not for everybody, but if you're a fan of like the old EC horror comics like we talked about, or especially Tales from the Crypt, this guy might be right up your alley. And with that, I'd like to give a thank you to Mezco Toys for helping me get a copy of Theodore to review for you guys, and of course thanking you guys for coming by and checking out the review. I hope you found it useful, and obviously we will see you again in the next one, hopefully real soon.